This video is sponsored by Dollar Shave Club. A few months ago, a rather peculiar story emerged from Butuan City in the southern Philippines. There, a woman known only by her alias Emily claimed to have a very serious issue of the unorthodox variety. She couldn't stop vomiting live frogs and bugs. To top things off, she and her husband even had video proof and were willing to go on camera on national TV to prove her claims were genuine. The TV program they approached was Kapuso Mo Jessica Soho, an award-winning news magazine show established in 2004 that covers everything from current events to pop culture. The one thing the show is also known for is their coverage of the paranormal. In fact, there are official uploads of many of their episodes on YouTube, and the paranormal ones are by far some of the most popular. As you might have guessed, the Philippines is definitely a heavily superstitious country. Given all of this, a story involving a woman who vomits frogs isn't all that out of line as far as the show's theme goes. But how did they even find her? Well, a video of Emily in the act, so to speak, was posted to Facebook last year and then sent over to the official Jessica Soho page. In the video, Emily can be seen seated, coughing and retching into a pink hand towel before pulling it away, only to reveal exactly what she claimed would be there. 2 genuine frogs, alive and still eager to break for freedom. Naturally, the show had to investigate. From here on out, the episode takes quite a few twists and turns, and if you'd like to watch it for yourself, I will have it linked down below, but be warned, there aren't any subtitles available. With that said, I'll try to summarize the best I can. Once in Butuan City, the team has Emily explain her story. According to her, the entire ordeal began in August 2018 when she began to feel pain around her abdominal region. After some time, she and her husband decide to pay a visit to their local albularyo, a type of folk healer. In the Philippines, most commonly in rural areas, these practitioners, despite not having any formal medical training, are a trusted source of healthcare by many locals in the absence of hospitals or clinics. As a child, I myself was even brought over to see one, but I can't say I got any positive results. Anyway, Emily had been given a few things to help her with the pain. She specifically mentions being given oil and amulets to wear whenever she felt her symptoms returning. Instead of helping, however, things only seemed to get worse. Emily claimed that it's then when she started to regurgitate small frogs that seemed to manifest out of nowhere. At this point in the episode, we come across a brief departure from the narrative. The host tells us that after the first interview with Emily had wrapped up, the crew was getting ready to leave when suddenly the familiar sound of Emily coughing and retching could be heard once more. The crew rushed back into her house, and this is what they caught on camera.
Ilang sandali nga lang matapos ang interview kina Emily at Paulo, bigla na lang nakarinig ang aming team ng malakas na ungol. Si Emily, sumusuka na naman daw at nung ibigay niya ang tuwalya sa kanyang mister, pagbukas, biglang meron itong palaka.
Following this, the program shifts focus to possible causes for what's going on. At first, the more superstitious approach is presented. They explain how amongst certain people, it's believed that if you're hexed or cursed, the person responsible may choose to use small animals such as frogs or various insects as a means of punishment. The folk healer then explains that he believes that the intended target wasn't Emily, but actually her husband, and the couple seemed to agree. According to Emily, a few months earlier there had been an altercation between her and a neighbor that resulted in her being struck in the stomach. According to her accounts of the story, the disgruntled neighbor was actually there for Emily's husband who wasn't home at the time. As expected, the authorities did get involved, and things were settled, at least legally, anyway. The couple had suspected their neighbor of being the one who either placed the hex on Emily or paid someone else to do so as a way to seek revenge. As for their theory about why the spell didn't work on Emily's husband, who was supposed to be the intended target, he believes it has to do with his protective tattoos. Whatever the case may be, the team behind Jessica Soho was skeptical, and rightfully so, but willing to stay open-minded. At one point, Emily was brought into a church, and this is what happened.
Sa kalagitnaan ng panggagamot, sinapian daw ito.
During the second half of the video, a paranormal investigator was brought in, and I know I'm getting off topic here, but tell me that this guy is not a Pinoy Zach Bagans. Anyway, the investigator begins, noting the time of day and current conditions of the surrounding area. According to him, this was prime time for what he calls elementals to be active. Emily presents him with jars full of the frogs and insects she's collected, incense is then lit, and then what the investigator refers to as a ritual begins. Once the inspection is over, the entire mood of the program shifts drastically. According to the investigator, he couldn't find anything he deemed out of the ordinary in the house or surrounding area, and he also decides to make some additional observations. He brings up a ton of good points that many seem to have missed while watching the clips of Emily vomiting. He notes how during Emily's episode, the frogs, Emily herself, and even the towel she pukes into remain dry. It should also be noted that when Emily was caught on camera in the act by the TV crew, they only arrived right as it was ending, so at any time Emily could have slipped a frog into a towel and started putting on a show. On top of all this, there are some inconsistencies with the story about the incident that supposedly kicked this all off. As I mentioned earlier, during the altercation between Emily and her neighbor, the authorities were involved, and due to this, there is a record of the event. The Jessica Soho team looked up the report, and according to documents, the incident was only listed as verbal threatening, and nothing physical had taken place. Given the accumulating evidence working against the couple, the show decided to install CCTV cameras in order to see what was really going on when no one was looking. But just as installation was taking place, Emily started having another episode. By that point, some cameras within the home were already online and able to capture the moments leading up to Emily puking. The show notes that her husband enters and exits the frame many times right before things start to go wrong. The show also takes note of the fact that Emily's home is right next to a creek, and it goes without saying that she'd have no trouble at all collecting frogs around the area. Another thing to be pointed out is that during the final incident, the conditions remained the same. Emily still needed to puke into a towel, and everything still remained dry. So obviously this entire thing was made up, and while some may find that disappointing, I'm actually far more interested in the reasons why. The TV program ends with Emily going to a formal hospital where she receives an ultrasound to definitely prove to her that she doesn't have any small animals or insects living inside of her. Numerous professionals also explain how such a thing would be completely impossible, especially if it's believed that these creatures are surviving within the stomach. As for why any of this happened, the show ultimately decided to send the couple to see a psychiatrist who came to the conclusion that what we were looking at was possibly some form of delusional disorder. He continues, explaining that either a traumatic event or heavy stress could have caused this disorder to start when it did, noting that the patient could be feeling extreme anxiety and paranoia. But what about Emily's husband? Shared psychosis was proposed to be a possibility behind why he seemed to be playing along, and in case you've never heard of such a thing, the condition is exactly as it sounds. Believed to most commonly occur in people within close proximity of each other, those suffering from this illness share delusions, believing in things that aren't true, and sometimes even hallucinations, seeing or hearing things that aren't real. Just to be clear, this was the psychiatrist's first impressions, not necessarily a formal diagnosis. The show actually took a very responsible approach to this, ending the segment talking about the importance of mental health, which is still widely a taboo topic amongst most of the country. Of course, stories of these nature aren't exclusive to Emily or even the Philippines for that matter. It seems that throughout every culture and time period, you hear some variety of story or urban legend that mentions giving birth to or vomiting small animals, sometimes even objects. One of the most common variations of these tales is one involving an unsuspecting girl going on a swim only to unknowingly swallow some kind of egg or larvae. In one case, it's believed to be an octopus egg, which is later removed via C-section after it had matured into a fully formed 8-tentacled creature. Back in 2004, the Mythbusters actually explored this one, and their conclusion was unsurprising. And on top of that, as a side note, as a stand-in for octopus eggs, the Mythbusters used tadpoles in their experiment, and again, the results were what you'd expect. As far as straight-up hoaxes go, however, the most infamous case is probably that of 18th century English peasant Mary Toft, probably better known as the woman who gave birth to rabbits, or rather managed to convince the medical community at the time that this was the case when it wasn't. This very much could be an entire video on its own, but to summarize, since the news of Mary's bizarre births had gone public, doctors quickly flocked to her to get a chance to possibly study a theory that existed at the time called maternal impression. This was basically the idea that things a mother thought, felt, experienced, etc. could actually transmit themselves, so to speak, to the developing baby within. A common example used would be the case of Joseph Merrick, also known as the Elephant Man. Of course, we now know that this is absolutely not true, but at some point the running theory was that while Joseph was still developing within his mother's uterus, she at some point must have startled an elephant or something along those lines, causing its memories to be imprinted on the unborn child, thus changing his appearance. In the case of Mary, some reports say that she startled a rabbit, while others claim that she was trying to catch rabbits. Either way, she was supposedly pregnant while this happened, so this is what was believed to be where maternal impression had kicked in, which of course wasn't the case at all. If you've never heard of this story before, you're probably wondering what happened when it came to the actual doctors who came to investigate. Yes, they wanted to observe a birth for themselves, and they did. Mary gave birth to rabbits, or rather, rabbit parts, many times in front of doctors. Given that this is impossible, I know you're wondering, and yes, once the truth came out, it turns out that Mary had been inserting rabbit pieces manually and pretending to deliver them. A similar method actually played a large role in the world of the paranormal by selling the believability of mediums in the 20th century. How? By making ectoplasm seem real. And you can already guess where I'm going with this, but it's a story for another time. Let me know if you want me to talk about it more or not in the comments below. Probably not the comments below because maybe YouTube will remove them. Tweet me. As I mentioned before, there are an infinite number of stories involving humans producing some kind of small animal or hybrid, despite that being completely impossible. And despite how far medical science has gone, it seems the myth is never truly going to disappear. But you know what can? Your body odor and unwanted hair. Why? Because this video is sponsored by Dollar Shave Club, and yes, that means it's once again time for me to criticize your hygiene. Now that we're done going outside for the year, why not sit back, relax, and let Dollar Shave Club deliver you the very best without you having to do a darn thing? I know what you're thinking. Rain, I already have a razor, stop trying to sell me stuff. Well, excuse me for trying to help you, and allow me to educate you on the fact that Dollar Shave Club doesn't just sell razors, silly. In fact, they sent me their shave, shower, and oral starter sets, which you, my friend, can get for only $5 each. What's in them, you ask? The Shave Starter Set, a classic, comes with Dollar Shave Club's executive razor and a 3-ounce tube of their Dr. Carter's shave butter, and to the ladies out there, remember, you don't need razors to be pink and overpriced to get amazing results. The Oral Starter Set comes with their weighty toothbrush and a trial-size version of their amazing toothpaste. And last but definitely not least, the Shower Starter Set, which comes with 3 trial-size versions of their Amber Lavender Body Cleanser, Citrus and Hawaiian Ginger Face Cleanser, and their Sage and Black Pepper Shampoo. And just in case you're wondering, I'm from Hawaii and I can personally confirm that their face cleanser smells like home, and they sent it just in time because some weird stuff's been going on in my face lately that I don't want to talk about. Oh, and I definitely needed a new toothbrush, which I'm sure all of you do as well. Yeah, you know that gross thing that you've been using since your freshman year in college? Time to get rid of it. Anyway, join the club with one of their starter sets for just $5. After that, the restock box ships regular sized products at regular price. Get this deal at dollarshaveclub.com/rainbot. Again, that's dollarshaveclub.com/rainbot. And remember, when you support our sponsors, you also support independent creators like me, and hey, you stop stinking too. And this is probably a really good time as well because we've just hit the second apocalypse. Whoop-de-doo. With all that said, thank you so much for watching, and if you're new here, consider subscribing, and hopefully YouTube will notify you. Since that probably won't happen, you can also follow me on Twitter, where I make sure to announce when a new video goes live. With all that said, I'll see you all again soon.